As usual, I hope you're having an awesome day. This is another vintage Poke openings video, except we're doing things a little bit differently this time around. I'm not going to be opening any cards today. I'm actually going to be going through the submission process to send Pokemon cards to PSA for grading. The reason why I'm doing this video is because there's a lot of people out there that are maybe unsure about the PSA submission process. They're unsure if it's worth sending their cards to PSA to have graded, and a lot of you just have general questions about the process. So I wanted to do a video in which I walk through a submission so you can get comfortable with the process before you decide if you're going to do it on your own. Overall, I think the PSA submission process is relatively intuitive for the user. It does a good job of kind of guiding you through each of the steps as you go, and there's a lot of question marks that allow you to see additional information for help if you're unsure about one of the pieces of the submission process. So I thought it was pretty straightforward, but I wanted to create this video so you folks could see how it's done, specifically in regards to Pokemon card submissions. A few other things to note with this: I won't be submitting only Pokemon cards. I am going to be submitting a few Yu-Gi-Oh cards with my 6 submissions that I have. The reason being is because I did have some holos that I wanted to submit, or at least I was thinking I was going to submit, but when I opened them up or I received them, they didn't quite make the cut. I did not think they were going to be able to pull a PSA 9 or 10, which in my opinion, I don't find it worthy sending in cards for grading if it's not going to get a 9 or a 10. If it's one of your favorite cards and you're just simply looking to preserve it over the course of your lifetime, then obviously still go ahead and submit the card if you don't think it's going to get a 9 or a 10. But in terms of trying to get the max value out of the card, generally if it's not going to pull a 9 or a 10, it's probably not worth submitting. So that's one thing I wanted to make note of. And then the other thing I wanted to make note of is that I did mention I have 6 grading vouchers available to me. These are available to me because I purchased the gold membership at PSA. It was $150. It came with 6 free grading vouchers, as well as a few other bells and whistles. Like I got the SMR price guide, and they also sent me a book about the 1952 Topps baseball card collection. So a few other things involved with that, but I primarily purchased it for the grading vouchers. They do have one level higher, which is the platinum membership. That is 15 grading vouchers for $250. And then they also have one membership level lower than me. I believe that's called the silver membership, which doesn't come with any free grading vouchers, but it does give you access to quarterly grading specials. Like, for example, I do believe the grading special prior to July, or for the quarter prior to July, was $7.50 for Pokemon card submissions. So at least with the silver membership, it's cheaper. I think it's $50. You don't get any free grading vouchers, but you do get access to those quarterly grading specials. So you'll kind of want to determine, I guess, what's best for you if you plan on getting a membership. If not, you're more than welcome to just go through the standard grading process without a membership. So I'm going to go ahead and jump into the submission process. As you can see on the screen here, I'm in the main submission screen for PSA. You can see the URL at the top says psacard.com/online submission center. If you go down to the bottom, you can see there's some estimated turnaround times. This is how long you can, for the most part, assume it's going to take your cards to get back to you as they go through the grading process. You can see there the regular service right now is taking 20 business days, or at least the last week it took about 20 business days. You'll see there's text at the bottom that tells you that's basically just an average. There's no guarantee it's only going to take 20 business days. So I'm going to go ahead and start my submission with the Start Submission button. And you can see it brings me to a screen here. I've got an old submission that I started out here and I never actually followed through with from a few months back. So I'm going to delete that and click Start New Submission. And you can see that it outlines the 7 steps of the submission process up top, and it's going to walk us through those as we go. So if you click the little question mark here, you can see the detail of the different item types that you have down below, and it gives you some additional information there. We're going to be submitting regular or small-sized cards. That's what Pokemon cards fall into, at least the majority of Pokemon cards, especially the vintage ones. But as you can see there's some other item types that you can select as well, like super-sized cards or other items that you'd like to have graded. You'll see there that I have to choose my submission type. Am I sending this in for grading, review, so on and so forth? The reason why you have to make that selection is sometimes people will send in items to have authenticated as opposed to graded. Basically just have PSA authenticate that it's real, like if you had a signed baseball from a baseball player or something like that. We're having cards graded, however. So we're going to choose the submission type of grading, and you can see on the right hand side of the screen there, we are doing the no autograph authentication. I don't have an autograph on any of these Pokemon cards, but if I did, you can see there's some additional services below where I could have the autograph graded or the card and the autograph graded. You'll also notice at the bottom left there, I have Collectors Club vouchers. Those are those 6 vouchers that I received from purchasing the gold membership level, as I mentioned. So I'm going to go ahead and check that box in order to proceed. You will see there's some additional information there in regards to how to redeem the Collectors Club vouchers. And you'll see that the max value per card they allow is $499. So that's something to keep in mind. I don't think any of my cards are going to be greater than $500. We'll get to what cards I submitted in just a moment, but I'm going to go ahead and check the Use Collectors Club voucher, and I'm going to go ahead and select my ID number there. So I'm going to click Next to move on to the third step, which is the service level. You can see this is automatically selected for me based on the fact that I have those 6 grading vouchers. They're just the standard economy service. The pricing says $20 for that, so if I didn't have my vouchers, it would cost about $20 per submission. So that's one thing to keep in mind. Now this is where I need to enter in my items. So these are the cards that I'm actually going to be submitting. You can see I have a quantity field there, a description field there, a minimum grade field, and a declared value total. The minimum grade basically means if I was to put a minimum grade of like 9 there, that would mean that if they grade the card and it's going to be an 8 or a lower, to just send it back to me as is and not actually put it in the holder that they use. You can see here, I'm showing you a little bit of a display as to what that is. This Barry Sanders rookie card here. It looks like if the item did make the 8.5 cutoff, which it did there, they went ahead and put it in the card holder. But if it didn't happen to reach the PSA 9, then they would just send it back to me. I would still be charged, however. So the first card I'm putting in there is the 2000 Unlimited Gym Challenge Misty's Golduck Hollow. If you remember from one of my previous videos, I did pull that. Now I need to figure out the declared value for this card. And if you read the long text on the right hand side of the screen, ultimately what they're telling you there is it's up to you to do the research and determine what you think the declared value is for this card. This is for insurance purposes, so if PSA was to damage your card or something was to happen to it, ultimately that is the worth of the card that you would be insured up to. Now, this is difficult for the submitter to determine because, one, we don't know what PSA is going to give the card, but we have to do our best to assume. And my thought here is that the Misty's Golduck is going to get a 9. I thought it was a really good card in terms of overall quality, but it did have a tiny white nick from what I remember up at the top left-hand corner, and the centering was not perfect on it. So I'm going to assume it's going to get a PSA 9, which on average, I looked at about the last 10 sales of Misty's Golduck. It averaged out to be about $150 for the PSA 9. Now, I would love if I could pull a PSA 10 on that Misty's Golduck, because right now it's selling for about a little over $1,000. The first edition I saw recently sold for $5,000. So that's one of the better cards in the set. I would be overjoyed if I could get a 10. I don't think it's going to happen though. So my assumption with all of these cards is that I'm going to get a 9. I never assume that I'm going to get a 10. So I always set the declared value to be about the average cost of that card if it was graded a PSA 9. I think that's a safe bet, unless you know the card is not worth a PSA 9. If you're sending it in and it's, you know, been sitting in a shoebox for the last 20 years and you played with it back in the day, it's probably not going to get a PSA 9. So just keep that in mind. But all of these cards that I'm submitting here were pack pulled, with the exception of the Yu-Gi-Oh cards. Well, those were pack pulled as well, but those were not recently pack pulled, and I did play with those a little bit. So all of the 4 Pokemon cards that I'm submitting here, I'm submitting them assuming that they're going to get a PSA 9. So if any of them would get a 10, that would be awesome. The 4 cards that I'm submitting is, like I said, the Misty's Golduck. I do have a holographic first edition Machamp from the base set that I pulled from a starter deck. That was in pretty good condition. I would love if that could get a 10 as well, but I'm not holding my breath. I also have a Lieutenant Surge's Magneton that I'm submitting. That card, funny enough, probably is the closest to getting a PSA 10 out of all of them, which is unfortunate because it's probably worth the least out of all 3, but that was a beautiful card. I really could not find any imperfections on it. That one is a chance at getting a 10. But so I had the Misty's Golduck, the Lieutenant Surge's Magneton, the Machamp that I mentioned, and then lastly I also have a base set 2 Wigglytuff. That one was a gorgeous card as well. I pulled that in my first video if you happen to watch the Psych Out theme deck opening. That one, the centering was not perfect on it. Everything else though was great. The holofoil was beautiful. It had the swirl. There were really no scratches or print lines on any of the holofoil. So that card was really pretty. My only thought on it is it really didn't have perfect centering, so I'm thinking that will knock it to a 9. But really, if the Wigglytuff, the Machamp, or the Golduck were to come back in a PSA 10, all 3 of those would net me close to $1,000. So if by some miracle they all came back as 10s, I would just be besides myself. I'd be so happy, but I don't think that's going to happen. So you can see I am submitting 2 Yu-Gi-Oh cards as well. I have a first edition Levia Dragon Daedalus from the Invasion of Chaos set. I'm mainly submitting this for grading because it's one of my favorite cards. That was a staple of my water deck when I did play Yu-Gi-Oh competitively back in the day. It's a beautiful card. It's one of the rarest cards I have left. I did sell a lot of my cards about half a year ago, but so I'm just getting that graded. I really don't know if I'm going to sell it. I might just hang on to it for sentimental purposes, but I am going to be submitting that, so I'm looking forward to seeing what that gets. Even though I did play with it back in the day, I kept it in a card sleeve, in a penny sleeve, excuse me, and it's in pretty darn good shape. The corners are just a little bit worn. I'm gonna guess it comes back a PSA 8, but the holofoil was in great shape. The centering was excellent. So I also do have a first edition Blue Eyes White Dragon. Unfortunately, it's not a first edition Blue Eyes White Dragon from the Legend of Blue Eyes White Dragon set, the very first Yu-Gi-Oh set ever released. That would be awesome. Those cards go for an insane amount of money in PSA 10 or even PSA 9, and they're one of the most sought after Yu-Gi-Oh cards available. This actually was a first edition Blue Eyes White Dragon from the, I believe it was the Kaiba Evolution starter deck. So not nearly as rare as some of the early Blue Eyes White Dragons, but it is in just about perfect condition. The centering was great. The holofoil was great. I honestly don't think I ever played it. It just has been in a penny sleeve ever since, and so I did want to submit that card just to see if I could get a PSA 10, because anytime you can have a PSA 10 at Blue Eyes White Dragon, it's kind of like a Charizard in Pokemon. Really doesn't matter what set it's from. If you can get a PSA 10 and a Charizard or a PSA 10 Blue Eyes White Dragon, you want to go for it. So I'm going to go ahead and submit it as such. It took me a little while here to find it, just because it was not one of the first Blue Eyes White Dragons that pulled up here. So as you can see, I'm struggling to find it, but I will find it here eventually. Just some other things to note with this. There were some other holographic Pokemon cards that I was considering submitting. And this kind of goes back to something I wanted to mention to you. Any of you who are out there buying Yu-Gi-Oh cards on Pokemon cards on eBay, don't buy opened packs unless you really don't care about the condition of the cards. I did bid on two auctions, in which one was an open jungle pack that had a holographic Nidoqueen, and I also bid on a open fossil pack that had a holographic Kabutops. Both of them told me that the cards were pack pulled and immediately placed into a penny sleeve. I don't know if that was done 20 years ago or if that was done recently, but I can say that neither of the cards were in even remotely close to PSA 9 condition. They weren't in bad shape by any means, but you could tell that the way they portrayed the cards on eBay in the image, they definitely, I'm not going to say they doctored them, but the way they displayed them is they looked a lot better than the way they arrived. They definitely did a good job of not displaying the whitening along the edges and whatnot. So if they were pack pulled, they must have been pack pulled 20 years ago and placed into a card sleeve and kind of ruffled around a little bit here and there, because they were nowhere near PSA 10 or 9 level. So those just went into my binder, and I'll just keep those as part of my collection for fun. But yeah, I did spend about $65 total on those 2 cards, and I'm not going to be submitting those. So you may remember the Brock's Rhydon that I pulled from the Brock Gym Heroes theme deck I opened a few weeks back. That, while it was in very good shape in terms of there was no whitening on the edges, there was no issues with the hollow foil, the centering on the card was just terrible, and I really don't know how much that would knock it off at PSA. If they only knocked it down to a PSA 9, maybe I would have considered still submitting it, but I just genuinely did not feel like it was going to get a PSA 9, even though it was freshly pulled from a theme deck. So I did go ahead and just put that one away as well. If you're not familiar with the Lieutenant Surge's Magneton that I'm submitting, that's because I lost the video footage to the Lieutenant Surge theme deck opening that I was going to post. Long story short, I'm not going to get into the details, but the video was lost, and ultimately when you're doing an opening video, you can't replicate it other than just the one time you do the opening. So I was not able to show that one on video, which is unfortunate because, like I said, the card is probably out of these 4 the closest to getting a PSA 10, but it's also probably the least of the least value. So we'll see what happens. Now I click next to move on to step 5 here, which is shipping and billing. I have some gray box on the left hand. I have a gray box on the left hand side of the screen there just to hide my address and some other private information. But you can see there it shows you the shipping and billing data. The $120 fee that I would be paying is waived because of my 6 free vouchers. And then you can see that it's charging me $14 for shipping. Now, depending upon the service that you use, like USPS, FedEx, so on and so forth, you can see that there's different rates below. This is something that you'll probably want to look over before you actually ship the items out, but this is just something to keep in mind, which is why I clicked the little question mark here so you folks could take a look at that information. So ultimately, I paid $149 for the gold membership plus $14 for the insured shipping, which sets me at about $163, I believe that would be in terms of everything that I spent on the PSA submission. So you can see the submission summary screen here, which is the next step. This shows me all of my information. So it shows my customer number, my item type, my submission type, which is grading, my service level, which is standard economy. It also shows me my fees on the right-hand side of the screen, and then shows me a summary of the cards that I have chosen to submit and their declared values singularly and their total declared values. It also has a PSA grading terms and procedure disclaimer for me to look at here. I'm not going to read this for you folks, but ultimately what it's saying is that every person who grades at PSA has their own subjective idea of what a PSA 10 is or what the grade should be, and ultimately you have to kind of just accept what they choose for the grade. You obviously can dispute it by sending it back to them, and sometimes they'll give you a higher grade or so on, but ultimately what they give you is what they give you. So you can see up top there it shows the PSA address, so it does give you that information. It also tells you basically about what postal services they accept, so you want to keep that in mind. I submitted mine with the US Postal Service. And then down at the bottom there, you can see there's a print button because there are 3 PSA submission forms that you need to print. 2 of them are for PSA, and you can see it says PSA copy number 1. The second will say PSA copy number 2. Those you need to include in your USPS or however you're shipping it. You need to include that in your package to PSA. So with the 6 cards that I'm submitting, I printed off these 2 PSA copies, and they're going to be included in my shipment. And you can see there's a customer must provide section there where I have to go ahead and enter in the total number of orders included in my package and the total number of collectibles in my package. It would be 1 order, and since I have 6 cards, that would be 6 collectibles. So I need to plug that in there. And this is just a video showing you ultimately there are my cards that I'm going to be submitting. This is how I package them. You can see that the cards are in card savers as opposed to the top loaders. I've heard some people have submitted top loaders to PSA and they have been okay with it, but they do say on their website that they have the right to not grade cards that are sent in a top loader and send them back if they want, because apparently they risk damaging the card when they pull them out of the top loaders. You can see here that I have put 2 slices of thick cardboard around the cards, and usually I would use rubber bands to wrap them, but unfortunately I didn't have rubber bands, so I actually used my girlfriend's hair ties, which will work fine, of course, as well. And you can see I also went ahead and wrapped these cards in bubble wrap. You can see they're pretty tight in there. Even if the cards were to bounce around in the package a little bit, they're going to be safe because of the bubble wrap. But there's my USPS priority mail package that I picked up from the post office. It's one of the smallest ones that they have, so I fit my 6 cards in there with more bubble wrap, and ultimately that's how I'm going to be submitting it. So once again, thanks guys for tuning into my video. If you do have any questions about the PSA submission process, please drop them in the comment section. I'll make sure to respond to every single one, and hope you enjoyed the video. Hope you felt it was informative, and look forward to some more openings in the next couple of weeks. Thank you.